Picture yourself just for a second wandering through one of those beautifully staged model homes, like at a housing exhibition.
Oh, yeah. The ones where the recessed lighting is just absolutely flawless.
Exactly. It washes the walls in this warm, inviting glow. And there's a perfectly placed, impossibly clean white sofa right in the center of the living room.
The kind of sofa that just screams, no one has ever spilled coffee here. Yeah.
Right. And you wander down the hall, maybe you run your hand along the pristine drywall, and you peek into this incredible kids' room. It's got a custom built-in desk, its own flat-screen TV, all the sports memorabilia perfectly arranged on those floating shelves.
It's totally intoxicating.
It really is. And as you're standing there taking it all in, you aren't just looking at wood and glass and textiles, are you? You are imagining a completely perfect future life.
Oh, 100%.
You stand in that immaculate chef's kitchen and you think, if I lived here, I'd be the kind of person who wakes up at 6 a.m. to make artisan sourdough bread from scratch. I'd be patient. I'd be organized.
Well, it is a highly engineered form of psychological seduction. When we cross the threshold of a model home, the real estate company, they aren't just selling a physical structure.
Right. They're selling an idea.
They're selling a very potent promise. They're offering a vision of future happiness, of unbreakable stability, like an idealized, frictionless version of your own family life.
Because they're tapping into a deeply rooted human desire for a permanent sanctuary.
Exactly.
And that universal feeling, that search for the ultimate unshakable home, is exactly where we are starting this deep dive today. We are exploring a single, just fascinating source.
It really is a unique angle.
Yeah. It's a manuscript of a modern sermon titled Promised Home. It was delivered by Pastor Yasushi Nemoto at Kahului Union Church in Maui, Hawaii.
Which is such a great setting for this specific topic.
Right. So our mission today is to look at how this sermon takes a very ancient text, specifically the Apostle Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5, and filters it through our incredibly relatable anxieties about real estate.
Renting, the chaos of moving, all of it.
Yeah, all of that. We're going to explore how housing becomes the perfect lens to understand the transience of human life and ultimately our purpose.
And Pastor Nemoto draws a very sharp, very necessary contrast right at the beginning of his manuscript. Because when you are handed that glossy, heavy stock brochure at the housing exhibition...
The really nice ones that feel expensive.
Yeah, exactly. The tagline on those almost always reads something like, a rich, secure future for you and your family. But the glaring reality is that a real estate company cannot actually guarantee your future.
Well, no. Of course not.
They can hand you a set of brass keys, they can transfer a deed, but they possess zero ability to guarantee that your life inside those walls will be free from, say, sudden illness or financial ruin.
Or relational heartbreak.
Right. The promise of the brochure is fundamentally an illusion of control.
Which means the brochure makes a promise it simply doesn't have the power to keep. But the Apostle Paul, in this ancient letter, makes a completely different kind of promise.
A permanent one.
Yes. And to understand Paul's promise, we first have to take a hard look at the reality of where every single one of us lives right now. The source material refers to our current human situation, our physical bodies, our current earthly lives as an earthly tent.
The earthly tent, or tabernacle, depending on the translation you're reading. And to ground this ancient metaphor in modern reality, Pastor Nemoto shares a very personal memory from his childhood.
Oh, the one about his dad's job.
Yeah. When he was in middle school, his father, whose job required the family to transfer to new cities frequently, finally started considering buying a permanent house.
So they would spend their weekends going to these housing exhibitions.
Exactly. And the pastor vividly remembers being a middle schooler, standing in one of those idealized kids' rooms we just described, completely captivated. For a family whose entire life was defined by the instability of moving out.
The allure of a permanent address was incredibly intoxicating.
It was everything.
But the contrast to that childhood dream is his current reality. Because right now, Pastor Nemoto lives in Maui, Hawaii.
Which sounds amazing.
Right. To anyone listening, living in Maui probably sounds like the ultimate paradise. But there's a catch. He is renting his home.
Ah, yeah. The renter's dilemma.
Yeah. And in the manuscript, he describes living with this constant low-grade background hum of anxiety. Because he doesn't own the property, there is always the looming possibility that the landlord might decide to sell the house in a hot market.
Or maybe they decide they just want to move back to Maui themselves.
Exactly. And if that happens, regardless of how settled the pastor and his family feel, they are evicted. They have to pack their boxes and leave.
You know, what's fascinating here is how effectively that specific modern anxiety illuminates Paul's ancient concept of the tent.
Oh, totally.
Think about the psychological weight of renting. If you're a renter listening to this, you know exactly what this feels like. You can have a wonderful Tuesday afternoon, the house can be perfectly comfortable, the weather can be beautiful.
But there is always a shadow of uncertainty cast over your living room.
Right, because you do not hold the ultimate deed. And the pastor expands on this vulnerability by pointing out that even if you do manage to sign a mortgage and own your home, it still isn't foolproof.
Oh, because of natural disasters and things.
Yeah, a sudden hurricane, a wildfire. Those things can reduce a lifelong investment to ash in a single afternoon.
So the house, no matter how much concrete is in the foundation, is inherently fragile.
And Paul's theological argument is that this fragility applies directly to your physical body and your current earthly existence. It is a tent.
And by definition, a tent is a temporary structure.
Exactly. It is vulnerable to high winds, to the elements, to tearing. Paul writes in the text that while we live in this tent, we groan, carrying heavy burdens.
Wow.
The psychological insight here is profound because it acknowledges a universal truth. Even when our lives seem perfectly happy, even when our current rental is beautiful and full of joy, we are always living side by side with the inescapable underlying anxiety that our tent is eventually going to decay.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if I'm the listener and I'm hearing that my current life, my body, everything I'm building is just a fragile, decaying tent.
It sounds rough.
Yeah. My immediate reaction is, well, this is incredibly bleak. It almost feels like an invitation to just check out entirely.
I can see how you'd get there.
Right. Like, if the tent is destined to collapse, doesn't this kind of theology just encourage people to absolutely hate their current lives? It seems like it would create a massive escapist mentality.
Where you look around and say, this tent is awful, get me out of here.
Exactly. I don't care about anything in this physical world.
Well, that escapist mentality is actually the most common trap when people first encounter this kind of philosophy. It's a natural defense mechanism to say, if it's temporary, I will detach completely and hate it.
That makes sense.
But the source material is adamant that Paul explicitly argues against that exact mindset. Pastor Nemoto highlights verse 4 of the text, where Paul says, we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be further clothed.
Okay, wait.
Or, to use a more modern phrasing, we want to put on, not take off.
Let me make sure I'm tracking this. Unclothed in this context, meaning dying.
Yes.
The act of just escaping the physical body.
Yes, exactly. Unclothed represents the desire to simply shed the burden of physical existence. Paul is arguing that the ultimate Christian hope is not a morbid desire to just strip off this miserable life and float away into some formless, vague, escapist void.
Okay, so it's not about destroying the old house.
No, the goal of the believer is the active anticipation of a tangible, guaranteed upgrade. Paul writes that the ultimate aim is for what is mortal to be swallowed up by life.
Wow, swallowed up by life.
It's a massive psychological shift from wanting to merely escape a bad rental to actively preparing to move into a brand new build.
And the pastor gives a brilliant, concrete example of what this new build mentality looks like in everyday practice. He shares a story about a time he bought a newly constructed house here in America.
Right, one of those sprawling suburban developments.
Yeah, where the builder has a shiny model home serving as the sales office, and then they build your specific customized house on an empty dirt lot a few streets over.
And the timeline he provides for this construction is crucial to the metaphor. It took exactly 3 months to build the house.
Which is remarkably fast.
It really is.
To go from a patch of dirt to a place where you can sleep and eat in just 90 days is a crazy transformation to witness. And he says he was so invested that he visited the construction site almost every single day after work.
Just watching it go up.
Yeah, he would pull up in his car and watch it evolve. He saw the cement trucks pour the foundation. A few weeks later, the wooden framing went up, then the drywall, and finally, the roof.
And obviously, he couldn't live in it yet.
No, it was a total construction zone. But he was watching this abstract promise become real, piece by piece, right in front of his eyes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of Paul's theology, that daily ritual of visiting the construction site represents how a believer is supposed to view the promise of the future.
The anticipation.
Right. The pastor notes that because he witnessed the daily progress, the vague, abstract idea of someday I will live in a nice house transformed into an absolute concrete certainty. The new house was becoming a tangible reality in his mind, long before the paint was dry, or he could physically move a single piece of furniture into the living room.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the way the source describes making that future reality feel certain introduces this concept of a guarantee.
A down payment.
Exactly. Paul writes that God gives the Holy Spirit as a guarantee for this heavenly dwelling. It's described like a down payment on the new build. And if we put this in modern terms, it completely changes your relationship with waiting.
How so?
Well, think about the last time you ordered something really important online, like maybe a piece of expensive tech you've been saving up for all year. The moment you hit purchase, you get a shipping confirmation and a tracking number.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
You do not physically have the laptop or the phone in your hands yet, but because you have that tracking number and you can log in and literally watch it move from the warehouse in another state to the regional transit hub to your local delivery facility.
Your anxiety drops.
Right. Your anxiety about whether or not it actually exists drops to zero. You have absolute confidence it is arriving. The tracking number acts as the guarantee of the unseen reality.
That is a great analogy. And the beauty of that tracking number is that you aren't operating on blind, naive hope that a package might magically materialize on your porch. You possess a verified, real-time indicator of its arrival.
Exactly.
The Apostle Paul is making the case that the Holy Spirit functions as that exact kind of verification system for the believer. It is a down payment that legally secures the final transaction.
Which changes everything about today.
Right. It raises an incredibly important question for anyone engaging with this text. If you possess absolute certainty that your permanent, perfect home is already built, paid for, and guaranteed to be yours, how does that fundamentally alter the way you treat the temporary rental you are currently standing in?
It has to change the economics of everything. You can't separate the future knowledge from your present actions.
No, you really can't.
The pastor explains the purely practical logic of this situation. If you know for an absolute fact that you are moving into a brand new, beautifully finished house in just a few weeks, your behavior in your current house changes instantly. You completely shift how you spend your money, your time, and your mental energy.
You immediately stop making irrational long-term investments in a short-term situation.
Right. If you are listening to this and you know your lease is up next month, you are not going to go to a high-end furniture store and buy a custom, wildly expensive sofa that perfectly fits the weird, awkward dimensions of your current temporary living room.
Because you know it won't fit the floor plan of the new house.
Exactly. You aren't going to sink $5,000 into repairing the landscaping of a backyard you are about to vacate. You learn to tolerate the peeling paint in the hallway. You ignore the squeaky floorboard in the kitchen.
Your resources, your actual financial budget, and your emotional bandwidth are now entirely oriented toward the future home.
Yeah.
And Pastor Nemoto connects this economic logic beautifully to Paul's famous, often quoted statement in verse 7. We walk by faith, not by sight.
People use that phrase all the time.
They do.
Yeah.
And very often, cultural interpretations frame walking by faith as some kind of naive, eyes-closed, wishful optimism. But the sermon frames it as a highly practical, strategic decision.
Wait, practical?
Yes.
What?
Walking by faith means deliberately budgeting your time, your emotional energy, and your love based on the concrete reality of the unseen future home, rather than just reacting impulsively to whatever broken thing is visible in front of you right now.
Oh, I love that. It's strategic resource management. You are allocating your portfolio based on where the market is going, not where it was yesterday.
Perfect way to put it. And this framework explains Paul's mindset in verse 8, where he states he would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord.
Which can sound kind of grim out of context.
Right. When read out of context, that line can sound grim. But through the lens of the housing metaphor, he is not suicidal. He is simply eager. He is the person whose cardboard boxes are fully packed, stacked by the front door, just staring out the window, completely ready for the moved truck to finally arrive.
But wait, let's play this out in the real world, because I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure. Go ahead.
If we follow this logic to its natural conclusion, I mean, if we aren't buying furniture for the old house and we aren't fixing the peeling paint and we're just waiting for the truck, do we just let the rental rot? Because if I'm moving in a month, maybe I stop taking out the trash. Maybe I stop paying the utility bill. If heaven is the guaranteed new build, why should the listener care at all about their life today?
That is the big question.
Like, why invest years into a career or build up a community or care about local politics or even bother being a good neighbor if this whole world is just a temporary tent we are eager to abandon?
That specific tension you are highlighting is the critical pivot point of the entire manuscript. It is incredibly easy to blur the line between walking by faith and outright destructive irresponsibility.
It seems like a slippery slope.
It is, but Pastor Nemoto explicitly warns against taking a wrecking ball to the rental. Just because you aren't pouring your life savings into the temporary house does not mean you are permitted to vandalize it. The source argues that the way you live in the old house is actually intimately tied to your right to the new one.
Because there has to be a difference between healthy detachment and active destruction.
Yes, absolutely. The underlying principle is that the new lifestyle doesn't magically begin after the moving truck drops you off. The new lifestyle begins the very moment you sign the contract.
Oh.
The pastor brings our attention to verses 9 and 10. Paul states that whether we are at home in the body or away from it, our overarching goal is to please the Lord. The values, the rules, and the culture of the permanent home dictate how you are required to behave while you are still inside the temporary tent.
So you don't wait until you arrive in the promised home to suddenly flip a behavioral switch and start living a life that is pleasing to the builder.
No, you are expected to practice those habits right now.
So it's about continuity of character. You are rehearsing for the reality you are about to step into.
Exactly.
But then the source brings up a concept that historically sounds terrifying to a lot of people. It says that everyone must eventually appear before the judgment seat of Christ to receive recompense for the deeds they've done in the body.
The judgment seat, yes.
I'll be honest, when you hear the phrase judgment seat, it sparks a lot of anxiety. It sounds like you finally get to the gates of this beautiful new house you've been promised. But there is a menacing guard standing there with a clipboard, ready to find a reason to deny you entry at the last possible second.
And the pastor fully acknowledges that intimidation factor. For many people, the phrase judgment seat inherently carries a heavy sense of dread.
Yeah, a fear of a final, terrifying exam where a single mistake means you fail and lose the house.
But the manuscript offers a powerful, paradigm-shifting reframing of this concept by using the analogy of a checkpoint.
Okay, so if I'm arriving at this checkpoint at the end of my life, and according to Paul, I've already got my VIP pass, the guarantee of the Spirit, what exactly are they checking for? What are the stakes if my entry is already secured?
Well, imagine you are on a grueling cross-country journey, and at the very end of it, there is a formal checkpoint you must pass through. The pastor points out that the believer is not standing in line at this checkpoint shivering with terror, sweating over whether they will be turned away.
Because of the tracking number.
Exactly. We have to remember the tracking number from verse 5. They already hold the guarantee. The entrance fee has already been paid in full. Therefore, this judgment seat is not a high-stakes final exam to determine if you get into the new house.
You are already getting in?
Yes. Instead, it is an audit. It is a detailed evaluation of how you spent your time, your resources, and your energy on earth as a person who was already saved. It's a review of how well your actions inside the temporary tent reflected the high values of the promised home.
So what does this all mean for the person listening right now? Because to synthesize this, it sounds remarkably like an exit interview at a job.
An exit interview? Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. If you're listening to this and you've ever changed careers, you know the dynamic. Let's say you've already interviewed for and accepted an amazing new position at a much better company. The contract is signed. Your start date is set in stone. You are absolutely leaving your current temporary job.
Right.
During your final week, HR sits you down with your boss for an exit interview.
And the power dynamic in that room is completely different than a normal performance review.
Exactly. You aren't sitting in that exit interview terrified that your boss is going to fire you. They literally can't fire you. You already have the better job. You are already out the door.
Right. The stakes are different.
But your actions during that 2-week transition period, like how thoroughly you handed over your projects to your team, how respectfully you treated your coworkers on the way out, whether you stole a bunch of office supplies or left your desk clean for the next person, that behavior still matters deeply.
Yes, it does.
That exit interview isn't about keeping your job. It is a profound reflection of your core character and how you stewarded your time, even when you knew you were leaving.
That synthesizes the tension of the source material beautifully. The judgment seat is the ultimate exit interview. It does not determine your final destination. It rigorously evaluates your stewardship of the transition.
Which completely changes the vibe.
It does. Understanding that distinction completely strips away the paralyzing existential fear of the checkpoint and replaces it with a profound daily sense of accountability and purpose.
It reframes the entire human experience. Which brings us to the overarching theme for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive. The Apostle Paul, as unpacked by Pastor Nemoto, is arguing a fascinating, counterintuitive paradox.
Which is?
That knowing exactly where you are going in the future does not render your life today meaningless. In fact, possessing that absolute certainty is the very thing that gives today its ultimate value and crystal clear clarity.
If you are blindly wandering through life with no idea where you are headed, every single day is confusing. Every broken floorboard feels like a crisis.
Yeah, because you think the 10 is all there is.
Exactly. But if you hold the guarantee of a promised home, you wake up every morning in your earthly tent asking only one incredibly clarifying question. Are my actions today pleasing to the Lord? Your present behavior is entirely anchored and stabilized by your future certainty.
So as we wrap up, we want to pose a question directly to you. Look at the architecture of your own life right now. Are you treating your current situation, your career trajectory, your social status, your physical body, like a permanent, eternal mansion that you are desperately, anxiously trying to keep from falling apart?
It's exhausting to live that way.
It is. Or are you treating it like a temporary tent that, while valuable, is simply a stepping stone to a promised home?
And to build on that, consider this final thought experiment to mull over as you go about the rest of your week.
I love a good thought experiment.
Imagine a complete stranger were to sit down and conduct a thorough audit of your metaphorical bank statements. By that, I mean they look at exactly how you spend your free time, where you direct your deepest emotional energy, and how you allocate your financial resources.
All the data.
Right, the raw data. If they looked at that data, would they guess you are planning to live in this earthly tent forever? Or would they look at the undeniable evidence of your life and see the clear, joyful proof that you are already packing your bags for a new home?
Wow. That is a thought that is going to stick with you long after you take your headphones off. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll catch you next time.